Planning an event and wondering how you can give your attendees the best experience possible? Take advantage of customized meetings with Hilton that make it easier than ever to incorporate health, wellness, entertainment, and waste reduction. From yoga and yogurt morning starts to puppies and ice cream afternoon breaks, Hilton will help you build an extraordinary meeting that attendees will remember. To book your next meeting or event, go to meetings.hilton.com. That's meetings.hilton.com. Digitel is one of the leading companies for live streaming events, running corporate virtual events, or managed webinars. If you're looking to reach worldwide markets or generate revenue from adding a virtual component to your meetings and conferences, leverage Digitel's 33 years of experience in creating flawless online events. For more information, go to digitellinc.com or email them at contactus@digitel.com.
Are you a follower? Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth. Here we are, another GatherGeeks.
Our guest today is Brett Lavender, who has a speaking, training, and coaching practice called the Persuasive Lion. And this is going to be a great discussion for people who speak at events, as well as planners and producers who coach speakers. Brett is a speaker, a former DJ, and he thinks and lives this all the time. So, David, as we kick off, how self-conscious are you right now about your voice and how we're speaking?
After speaking to him, I was very concerned about how I end my comments and how I deliver my comments and what the tonality of the comments are. Because everything that you do apparently affects the performance. And I don't think we're training our speakers well enough at events to be the content providers that we think they should be.
Mm-hmm. Brett believes that the delivery is actually more important than the content, which is kind of a radical notion. And this conversation is going to be a mix of theory and practical advice. You're going to hear terms like neuro-linguistic programming, but you're also going to get a lot of examples, and our listeners may actually find themselves talking out loud to test these out yourselves. And that's okay. Please do that. We encourage that.
Absolutely.
So let's take a listen.
So, Brent, how have events changed, and what have you seen, and how has that impacted what you do today versus what you did when you were a kid? Because your backstory is really interesting too. But I want to go into first, like, how have you seen this industry change, and what's your basic premise of the way you look at the world?
All right. Well, the way I look at the world. Okay. So events have changed enormously since I started doing this. I started in this industry when I was 19 years old.
And what did you do then?
I worked for a startup DJ company that was like the pioneer of this entire industry. It was a company called Heart to Heart, and the gentleman that owned that is still in the business on Long Island. But it was brand new. It was very exciting because at the time, the events that we were doing were just, you either hired a band or you hired just a regular DJ. And then this guy came up with an idea that said, well, why not have somebody in front that
like a social director,
work the crowd, right? That's going to motivate the crowd, not just leave people at their will, make things happen. But I mean, you're talking about such a different era. It was wired microphones. It was real records. It was cassette tapes. It was bubble machines. It was like, I mean, what we would look at today is so corny and so rudimentary, right? And now the business has evolved. The business has evolved in such a way that, I mean, you really need to be creative and outside of the box, because the things that worked even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, do not work today.
So what does that mean? Like, what was it like when you started?
I think society has gotten a lot more sophisticated. And because they've been exposed to this type of entertainment for so many years, they're always looking for something new, something cutting edge, something different. And like I said, I mean, we would get away with doing routines with the crowd. And like, it was a very...
Like, what's a routine? What does that mean? Bring us back, paint the picture.
Costume changes. And like, we did a Motown medley, and we did a Jackson 5 medley, and had the crowd following along. And today, if we were to do that kind of stuff, They would look at us like we were crazy. Today, it's more about playing really good music. It's cutting edge technology in terms of the lighting and the video support. It's about having really good looking performers out there interacting with the crowd. And as far as the MC is concerned, what's used to be more is more, now less is more. They just want a good hype guy on the mic. They want a good guy with a good voice who's good looking and outgoing and can just kind of warm up the room versus somebody that's going to orchestrate this whole show. It used to be a show. Now it's no longer a show. And again, because, you know, the events have been going on for so long, people they're over it. They don't want that same corny show. They want just great music. Think about it. Now we've got decades and decades and decades worth of amazing music to play. So it's really about having a great DJ and then just having somebody on the mic that understands humanity.
So it's a connoisseur society then. We're all connoisseurs of this in a sense.
Exactly.
We've lived this for so long that like our taste in food and our taste in homes and our taste in everything is just getting much more sophisticated.
It's advanced to a point where it really has to be cutting edge in order to be exciting. You can't just do the same thing that they did last week, even last week. You have to do something new.
So you've evolved from this 19-year-old DJ type person that goes and sort of makes a crowd really have a great time to a motivational speaker, but you've learned a lot from the DJ side and from what you did in the past. Go a little bit in terms of your view of what an event is from a macro perspective.
Well, I mean, so speaking to what you just said, I mean, I've been so lucky to be in this industry and take from it so much more than you would think. I've learned so much about humans and the human mammal because of my experience in front of people since I'm a kid. I've been on a microphone for the last 30 years. And, you know, as far as what is an event, you know, I realize it's kind of like we said, it's like a watering hole, you know. Humans are very different types of creatures. We think that we walk into a room full of humans and everyone reacts the same way, and that's so far from the truth. If you look at the natural world, the jungle, you know, a lion never really, unless it's kill or be killed, a lion will never talk to a giraffe. And a giraffe will never talk to a hippo. And a hippo will never talk to a bunny rabbit, ever, in the entire existence of their lives. But you put all these people in a room together and we think they're all the same. And it's so far from the truth. Because if you look around the room, there are lions and giraffe and hippos and bunny rabbits and on and on and on. And they all have very, very different ways of communicating, very different ways of interacting, very different response mechanisms. So as the guy on the mic, like circling back to an event, you have to be able to interact with and communicate with all of these different animals at the same time.
And so how does that work? I mean, what are the personas of the lion versus the bunny rabbit? And how do you sort of, you know, figure out how to make this crowd coalesce or have a good time or interact? Or
right. So one thing that I've come up with over the course of many, many years of studying mammals, and I don't mean just humans, I mean mammals in general, is that there's one thread that actually does go through all these different types of mammals. Mammals, not reptiles, not birds, not insects, mammals. And that's instinct. We're all instinctive. We all respond to things based on things that we can't control. We don't know we're thinking it. We don't realize we're seeing it. We don't realize we're smelling it or feeling it. It's just an automatic instinctive response. And so I've studied a lot on neuro-linguistic programming and human behavior. And so that's really what allows me to communicate with an entire room full of people all at the same time. I know how to use my voice. I know how to use my melody. I know how to use my facial expressions and my eye contact. And I've developed a process through which I can pretty much get all the mammals in the jungle to respond at the same time.
So go through this one by one as an event. Look at it from the point of view of an event organizer who's hiring somebody to create this sort of orchestra. How do you do it? Like, what does the event organizer?
Everything counts. You know, I have a whiteboard in my office, and one of the things that I teach my guys is every ounce counts. Everything that goes into, if we're talking specifically about an event, it's the layout of the room, it's the temperature of the room, it's the lighting, it's the quality of the sound. Then it comes down to, who am I dealing with? Every crowd is different. And week to week, the same crowd can be different from one week to the next. And you have to basically have an understanding of what's going on in the room.
So go back to the layout of the room. What about the layout of the room do you do?
Well, I've always listened.
What's your sort of theory about that?
Everyone tries to reinvent the wheel. And I'm not an advocate of that at all. There is a certain layout of a room that is designed to create an atmosphere where people are going to participate and have fun.
And what is that?
Well, from my perspective,
paint the picture.
It's a rectangular room where the dance floor, assuming there is a dance floor, is centered. And then the tables are completely all the way around. And the focal point, whether it's a DJ or a band or wherever the entertainment is coming from, is right at the center of the room. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And that's even if it's not like a social situation, even in a meeting or a conference.
Correct. And if it is a social situation, one of my other fundamentals is, as far as dance floor, too big is too big. Too small is just right. Because you want to create that feeling of connectivity. The other thing that I've learned about humans is, we're made up of electricity and water, right? And if you think about it, I'm a fanatic about the fact that everything is an analogy for everything else. So anything that you move in goes up.
Say that again. What do you mean by that, actually?
Okay. So when you compress something, the only place that it can go,
it's the laws of physics,
is up. Right. Humans are physical beings. So if you move them together, it just makes logical sense that the energy will go up. If you allow them to spread out too much, the energy will go down. If you take a bottle of water and you squeeze it, the water in that bottle is going up. If you let it out, if you unsqueeze it, the water is going down. It works the same way with human energy. So when people talk to me about laying out a room, I always say, too small is just right. You want it to be a little too small for the size of your room, so you make people move together so that their energy connects and therefore goes up. And that's whether it's a social setting or even a meeting. You don't want people too spread out. It just drops the energy level, period.
So bring that back to the animal kingdom. What have you learned as a persuasive lion? Mm-hmm. Is that something that fits into that world?
Applies to that aspect of it. Okay. I see.
I want to kind of keep going and sort of connecting
that's fine. That's fine. I don't know that the enclosure aspect of it applies to that, but like whenever you watch a video of any event, there's always more excitement when the crowd is compact versus when the crowd is spread out. The cheesiest videos that you see, like of the wedding singer kind of thing, is when people have 3, 4, 5 feet of space in between them, and it just looks and feels corny. Yeah. Versus you watch a video of a concert where people are just packed in, and the energy is through the roof.
Okay,
so that's just speaking to the layout of the room.
So go back into the lighting and things like so. The other elements, so that if someone's listening to this, they know these are your rules. In a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very specific about the way I like a room set up. And unfortunately, because I'm not always in control of that, it becomes a battle. But I mean, you want the lighting low, you want it to, I'm always hesitant when I'm going into an afternoon room with windows open, because it just takes away from the energy. This is just speaking to human nature, human instinct. People respond better when they're in an intimate setting. People also like to feel anonymous. So especially when you're talking about a social event where you're getting people on a dance floor, people don't want to be in a spotlight. They want to be able to kind of blend into the crowd, which is why we hand out sunglasses to people at an event. I mean, think about
why do you do that?
Think about the reality that it's almost an odd thing to think about. We're handing out sunglasses.
This is a normal thing you always do.
Indoors at an event. Why? I'll tell you why. Because people like to feel anonymous. Most of these people are not outgoing party goers, club goers, dancers, performers. They're introverted mammals that are not particularly comfortable being in front of a crowd. It's circling back to what I teach for a living in terms of communication skills. Most humans that I teach are terrified to be in front of a crowd. Sometimes terrified just to have a one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-three conversation.
Public speaking is like one of the most dreaded things in the world.
And so if you think about the logic of that, why would you hand out your indoors? It's dark outside. Sunglasses were traditionally designed for a sunny day to block the sun. Yet at these events, we're handing out sunglasses in a dimly lit room indoors when that would logically make no sense. But psychologically it does, because people want to be and feel anonymous. So when they put on a pair of sunglasses, automatically they become invisible.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's really intriguing, right?
Right. What else do you? What other kind of techniques do you use like that?
Well, I mean, I'm always thinking about the temperature in the room is a big factor. People want to feel comfortable. Oftentimes, especially if you're doing an event in the middle of August and the room is already warm, and then you're going to bring 300, 400, 500 people into a room, and then you incorporate jumping around and dancing and raising body heat. You need the room to be comfortably cool. Otherwise, it gets uneasy for people. People don't want to feel uneasy, especially when they're doing something that already makes them feel uneasy. So you want to create an atmosphere of comfort, right? And that also speaks to then being the guy on the microphone, right? So I know how to use my instrument, my vocal cords. I understand that if somebody sees something that's pleasing to the eye, it stimulates their sense of sight. If somebody smells something that is stimulating to their nose, it enhances their sense of smell. Well, it's the same thing with sound and hearing. So when you hear a beautiful singer, like there's times where you'll hear somebody singing and go, oh, wow, unbelievable, or just instrumental, whatever. So these are vocal cords. So the better you tune these cords and whatever you put into that microphone is expressed through the speakers, if that's a pleasing sound, people are more inclined to respond.
How do you train your vocal cords to do that? And what are some of the techniques?
It's a muscle.
So what do you do?
I've been a singer for years.
Okay.
And I also have studied the art of melody.
So talk about melody. I know that you use that in your speeches and things like that. Tell us melody, about what that means. So, it doesn't mean singing melody.
Well,
always.
If you think about it, so watch. So when I just said, if you think about it, right, every one of those notes are trackable. So that is singing.
Right.
I'm just singing in speak,
right,
so to speak, right? But one of my fundamentals, one of my benchmarks is that when you speak to people, the delivery is always way more important than the content. Always, 1,000%. The delivery.
So give us examples of that.
Well, delivery encompasses the entire machine, right? Your facial expressions, your eye contact, your body language, your hand gestures, even the thoughts that you think, because that's controlling the dilation of your pupils and your pheromones. So the delivery of the message that you're trying to communicate is always more important than the content. But as it relates to vocal melody, and this blows my mind, most humans that I come in contact with have no understanding of this. So I do an exercise with my audiences called Let's Eat Grandpa. And so on a pad, I'll write 2 sentences. Let's eat grandpa, let's eat grandpa. And then I'll put different accent marks in terms of guiding the audience as to how to say these 2 like exact same sentences, but saying them very differently. So without having a visual here, I can just say, so the first sentence says, let's eat, grandpa. Well, what does that mean? To any normal human that understands English, let's eat, grandpa means, come on, grandpa, let's go eat, right? Now, what's interesting about that is when I say that, because I'm thinking a certain thought, everything about my delivery changes. I go, let's eat, grandpa. My eyes light up. I smile. My facial expressions change. And the audience receives that in the way that it was intended. And then I go to sentence 2. And sentence 2 says, let's eat, grandpa. And it's automatic. I can't shift. I can't change. I can't control the shift. Because I know that when I say, let's eat, grandpa, there's a very different message being communicated there. Therefore, the entire machine changes. Therefore, when the machine changes, the recipient responds differently.
Right.
And so that's vocal melody is so important. You know, I always give people the example. The next time you call somebody on their cell phone and you you get their outgoing voicemail, most humans, for whatever reason, I to this day, I still have no understanding as to why it went this way. Most people, and maybe it's a measure of discomfort, of lack of confidence, but most people speak on what I call the upturn. So you get somebody's outgoing voicemail and it says, hi, this is David, and I can't get to my phone right now, but if you'll please leave your name and number at the sound of the tone, I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Now, if you think about that logically, every phrase in that sentence was positioned as a question. Because when you ask a question, you go, can you do this for me? Can you help me with this? However, the downturn is such a powerful communication tool. And so when I teach people this, and it literally is, it's a switch. The minute they start to pay attention to it, I cannot tell you how many people have come back to me and said, brilliant.
So what is the downside? Say it the other way.
Downturn, right?
Okay.
So, hi, this is David, and I can't get to my phone right now. But if you will please leave your name and number at the sound of the tone, I will get back to you as soon as possible.
So it's more persuasive.
It's persuasive. It's convincing. So when I teach people how to speak, I always say a request or a demand is always spoken on the downturn. So, for example, you know, I have a philosophy of a triad that I speak on the downturn at this time, right now. So, you know, when you were a kid, if your dad said, David, take the garbage out. Like, yeah. David, come on, take the garbage out. Yeah. David, take the garbage out now. Since we are kids, it's primordial. Everyone in a position of power uses a downturn, whether it's a judge or a police officer or a teacher or a principal or a priest or whomever is in charge. When they want to speak to you in a commanding way, they speak to you on the downturn. So what I teach people is you don't have to be a Marine drill sergeant. You don't have to use this every sentence that you speak. But if you start to pay attention to it, subconsciously, you will find that people are going to respond to you more and more and more in tune with what you want versus speaking on that upturn.
So you're talking about, let's say, if you bring it back to the event use case, then
I use it all the time on the microphone.
It makes it more persuasive.
It's more persuasive. It's just, like I said, from a psychological perspective, humans are just more inclined to respond to that particular melody.
That's so interesting.
And then, like I said, you know, if you can combine that with tuning your instrument the right way, everyone's got a different instrument. You know, a clarinet sounds very different than a saxophone, and a saxophone sounds very different than a guitar. So if you tune your vocal cords to be in the right pitch, the right key, the right timbre, it's going to sound pleasing. So right off the bat, people are going to be more inclined to listen to you.
What about, you're sort of blending a couple of things here in my mind. Like there's a concept of likability.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems like what you're doing is you're trying to get to likability and command.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Likability is a good word. The word that I would choose is believability.
Oh, that's a good point. Good point.
Right. You know, when I teach people how to speak, you know, I start off my keynotes usually the same way, saying the best salespeople on the planet never sell. They deliver. And the reason that I say that is because we're all salespeople. In some way, shape, or form, we all sell. Whether we're trying to engage with a human that we find attractive, whether we're trying to get a better deal on a car, whether we're actually selling something, we're always selling, right? So what I've come to believe is that genuineness, believability, just being real. So that starts with the brain and the thoughts that you think. If you think to yourself, I'm trying to sell this person on something, it's going to come off salesy. But if you come off just saying, I'm trying to convince this person of something, it's going to come off believable because you believe it.
Right. Well, I mean, the big buzzword is authenticity. That seems to be what people are craving, intimacy and authenticity. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I guess, when we're writing scripts for events, we leave that piece out because it becomes so antiseptic.
Correct.
So how do you sort of like guard against that? I mean, how do you, when you get, I'm sure you go to an event, you don't really read your scripts anymore.
No,
I mean, you have, as a speaker, the minute you're reading something, you're dead.
I don't even when I do keynotes, I never have a script.
Yeah.
I put down a few little bullet points of topics that I want to touch on. And then luckily, over the course of X amount of years of doing this, I've created this, what I like to call my proverbial backpack of thousands and thousands of words and phrases. And that leads me into another concept, which is the concept of effective pausing.
That's interesting.
You know, when you watch speakers and they go, I'm able to bypass that through the use of effective pauses. And what I equate that to is like if you're in a car on the road and you spin off the road, you can spin and spin and spin as long as you, at some point, navigate your way back onto the road and continue going and you don't crash into a tree, right? So when I hear speakers going, and don't get it twisted, sometimes I'll go there because I'm just at a loss. But because I understand the value of an effective pause and how much value there is in that for me and the listener, I'm usually able to bypass that feeling of not knowing where I'm going. And it allows the listener to catch up to me, and it allows me to catch up to where I'm going.
So how do you do that? Give us an example of bypassing the ums and the ahs.
You know, it's been a long time for me to think about it. This. Yeah.
It's hard to think about it. It's like driving a car.
Like I said, I like to consider myself a relatively eloquent speaker. And because of that, I'm intellectual and I do have this backpack full of words and phrases that I can call on anytime I want to create an image. So when I speak to people on the mic, off the mic, in person, whatever it may be, I'm always usually thinking of an image in my brain and then just describing it. So I have one exercise when I teach people how to speak called describe the room. Like we're in your office right now and there's literally an unlimited amount of things that you could describe to me about what's going on in this room. The lighting, the imagery, the temperature, it doesn't matter. But when you think about an image, when you look at an image, it's much easier to describe it because you don't have to think about it. It's right there. I can just tell you what's going on in here. That's what I do with my brain. And as far as the pausing is concerned, I've come to believe that an effective pause is more often than not as important or more important than the words because it creates emotion. It gives you creative license to make a point without actually having to speak and speak and speak. And it gives the audience the chance to stop and listen and pay attention.
When's the big event? Hilton is here for planners with their exclusive customized meetings. Become a wow maker and save time by letting Hilton help you present an extraordinary event, one that leads to memorable and meaningful connections. Visit meetings.hilton.com and let Hilton help you.
It brings up a point for me. When I first started public speaking, I would talk too fast. How do you modulate your...
Everyone talks too fast.
Yeah.
Everyone.
How do you modulate that?
So I can tell you right now that, speaking is an art. It's just like anything else. It's like learning a sport. It's like learning how to sing. It's like working out. It's an art. You have to really understand it. Most people speak too fast for a variety of reasons. I mean, all of it is subconscious, but it's lack of confidence. It's because they don't feel comfortable to spend too much time. They just want to get everything out as quickly as they can. And it's mind-blowing to me because this exercise works every single time I do it. And so I'll be teaching people how to speak, and they're going through whatever process they're going through, and I'll go, all right, so what I want you to do is speak uncomfortably slow. So slow that it makes you feel uneasy. And then every single time they do it, the rest of the room, assuming I'm doing a workshop in front of a group of people, go, unbelievable. So much better. Because when you speak too slow for yourself, you are right on time for your audience.
That's a very good point. And I've learned how to do that, but I have to keep telling myself all the time, slow down, slow down,
it's
slow
discipline.
down. Yep.
You have to be confident enough to let you want them hanging on the edge of their chair, waiting to hear what you have to say next. But all of this ties into the same concept. You want to create the most impressive delivery system that you can. So what does that mean? That means if you're going to speak uncomfortably slow, make sure your voice sounds great, right? Make sure your hand gestures are speaking the same language as your words. Make sure your facial expressions are speaking the same language as your hand gestures. Make sure the thoughts that you're thinking are so comfortable and calm and connected with the audience that the pheromones you're giving off are enticing. And if you have the whole machine in line and everything speaking the same language, there's not one person on this planet that will have any option but to listen to you. And that's why it's called persuasion.
Well, it's interesting, though, you're talking about what I'm seeing at a lot of events, that the organizers don't necessarily spend a lot of time on the content or the delivery or anything else, and they leave that sort of up to chance. Are you seeing this as a whole new discipline to make the experience better so that you're training all of the speakers at a conference or all of the people at a dinner to speak and to use the same sort of... It's almost like a brand guideline when you're doing something.
Well, right. I mean, to me, I'm so thankful for the invention of technology because it makes someone like me so much more valuable. I mean, people have no clue how to do 90% of the things that I'm talking about. Whether we're at a social event or a conference, when I talk to people, it blows my mind that the art of interactive verbal and nonverbal communication has been lost. And that's why, I sent this to you. That's why a big piece of one of the major piece of my program is called The Lost Languages. They're lost.
So go through a little bit of those in terms of your...
Oh, well, anything verbal and nonverbal has been lost by humans. So when I talk about fundamentals being, persuasive and compelling eye contact. Eye contact for me is literally number one. And it's mind-boggling how people are so uncomfortable. I read somewhere not too long ago that people become uncomfortable looking someone else in their eyes literally after like 3 seconds. I have what I like to call easy eye contact, right? It's not creepy. It's not aggressive. It's not sexual. It's not romantic. It's It's just easy. I can look a man, a woman, an adult, a child of any race, of any creed in their eyes for an extended period of time and just have it feel real and easy. And people get so uncomfortable with that.
You see people that are looking away a lot. You know,
well, how many times have you spoken to somebody that's literally like we are, 3 feet away? And I mean, I've had people have a conversation with me like this, where you're
literally not seeing their eye contact.
And part of it is discomfort, and part of it is because they're so in their brain, they're concentrating so hard on what they want to say that looking at you is going to be a distraction.
Right, right. So we're talking here about also, this is an interaction of a guest is what you're looking at, as opposed to a speaker and an audience. This is everybody.
Well, right. I mean, if you want to equate this to being on stage, whether I'm at a conference or at a social event, I have the ability to look at an entire room and at one point or another have everyone feel like I'm looking directly at them. And that also creates an enormous amount of response.
How do you do that?
That's really a learned skill.
Yeah, it's just sort of like you keep looking at different people.
Scanning a room. Well, you have to also be able to open your eyes, and you could be looking at 20 people in an area and have them all believe that you're looking directly at them. But that's not just about eye contact. That's about your physical delivery too, because I can look at a room and go, hey, everyone over here. No one knows exactly who I'm looking at, but there's a possibility that I might be looking at you, and they don't want to be called out. So I can literally scan a room of 500 people instantaneously. So I do, when I train performers, right, I do an exercise called the eye contact game. And so I'll have a room of 50 dancers standing in front of a stage with their arms at their sides, no expression on their face. And I'll ask one of them to come up on stage. And I'll have them go through what I call follow steps, just trying to get the audience to respond to you. But I tell the crowd, until this person makes connected eye contact with you, and I don't mean just a glance, I mean literally makes a connection with you physically through your eyes, do not respond. And I've had people standing on stage for 20 minutes trying to get this done. And one of the craziest things about this is they'll get the room going because they've made eye contact with the majority of the room. And the people that they have not made eye contact with, that are still not responding, are standing right in front of them.
Oh, really? So the people are like looking
literally right in front of them, and they don't even see it. It's what we call our blind spots. We don't even realize that we haven't connected with the people right in front of us.
Is the eye contact about intimacy too? Is it? I think it seems like there's
certainly. Well, intimacy is an interesting word because I don't necessarily always want my eye contact with a stranger to be intimate. It's about connectivity.
Is it some sense of intimacy that makes you connect because you're seeing somebody up front?
Well, the eyes. They, like I said, the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? And most people don't pay attention to how powerful these two lamps are and the things that they create in our brain. And if you, like I said, I'm very into the brain and neurolinguistic programming and how that controls the drone, the machine. And this is the entryway.
Well, when you meet Bill Clinton in a room, he looks at you, he touches you, he does all of these things. Right. And I don't know whether it's planned or whether it's just he understands it.
I don't know if he was trained or not, but, a very good friend of mine who I trained as a speaker said, anyone that you see on stage that is an effective communicator, you can bet has studied it. It doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
You really have to study the process. So speaking back to the lost languages, I write persuasive and compelling eye contact, body language, facial expressions, hand gestures, communicating with passion, conviction, authenticity, and believability, impactful, intellectual, and visually expressive usage of eloquent words and phrases. And I made that so long because it really speaks to your ability to use words effectively. Because the words are important, but they're way less important, like I said, than the delivery.
But is it also the perception of intellect?
Well, of course. I mean, listen, I'm not going to judge anyone for their lack of intelligence or their exceptional intelligence. But obviously, if you want to be an eloquent, effective communicator, there has to be a level of intellect
or trust that you
you
believe that person.
Words effectively. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people use the wrong words or the wrong phrasing or the wrong grammar. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's a laundry list of details that go into effective communication, but it starts with the thoughts that you think. And that's why, speaking back to slowing down, that gives you the opportunity to pick and choose the right words, the right phrasing, the right melody, the right pauses as you're speaking. When people speak too fast, they stumble over their words.
Yeah. So we should be speaking more slowly
all the time. And then, then I go into, which we spoke about, vocal techniques, which has to do with just training your vocal cords, using your diaphragm. It's all about breathing properly. It's about supporting your breath and supporting your sound. It really is, if you think about it. So we've been speaking now for, 20 minutes, half an hour. Literally, if somebody were to track this conversation, every single word that we have spoken has a note attached to it on the keyboard, on the scale. So why is this any different than speaking? The best storytellers, right? The best storytellers, especially little kids, are the most animated people on the planet. Why? Because it just sounds more pleasing to the ear. So when I talk about vocal technique, there's a lot that goes into that in terms of training your voice, understanding melody, and speaking in a very sing-songy way that is not monotone, that's not boring, that's animated, that has ebbs and flows and pace changes and all of that. And then the most important thing, again, going back to the brain, is positive self-talk. It's been forever that people have said you are what you think you are. And so the thoughts that you think are going to control every single aspect of how your communication is received, is delivered and received. And we don't get that. People don't realize that. People think that they can think whatever they want, and then they can go into a situation and communicate, and the audience is just going to respond.
Yeah, that's so funny. So I think I've told you this. Somebody came up to me a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, and said, you have PMA. And I said, what the hell is that? That feels like a disease. Positive mental attitude. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like that was something that has been one of the reasons that I've been able to do what I've been doing so long.
It's contagious.
Yeah. And I really do believe that at events especially, that people respond to that stuff.
Well, there's a few things that we could talk about regarding that. So positive attitude, confidence. I have a thing that I speak about, and I always have to ask the person that hired me if I can say this on stage, but it's no fucks given, right? And it's not no fucks given that I don't care about people, that I don't care about the world. It's just I have a different relationship to the outcome. It's a very liberating feeling. I know that no matter what happens in a situation, whether it's personal, professional, on stage or off stage, unless it's going to crush me like a house falling on me or light me on fire or make me implode, what's the difference? And that's a very freeing attitude to have. And most people don't possess that. It's a learned skill. Most people give many fucks, right? And so when I come off, especially when I'm on stage, with this attitude of, listen, if you like me, great. If you don't, okay, I'm fine. Richard Branson says, there's another bus coming in 10 minutes. Whatever. Who cares? Mm-hmm. What's the worst that could happen? But when you go into a situation with that kind of an attitude, especially on stage or in a sales meeting, it's so liberating, right? And then I do another exercise that's what I call the silly game. It's not the stupid game. It's the silly game, right? Why? Because I will be childlike for the rest of my life. Not childish, childlike, playful. So even when I'm having a serious conversation with somebody, there's still a modicum of silliness and playfulness behind it. Why? Because in this world where everything is so crazy right now, government, politics, healthcare, disease, terrorism, the economy, everything is just so stressful. Not a lot of people are comfortable letting their hair down and being silly. And I've found that energy is intoxicating to people. And so if they can't do it themselves, they want to be around somebody that gives off that energy. And so I do an exercise with everyone that I teach called the silly game, where I force you to let your hair down and be playful. And it's one of the most difficult. Ironically enough, it's called the silly game. You would think it'd be fun and easy, and it is.
What does
not.
It look like?
Well, I do it in different variations depending upon who I'm teaching. But when I teach performers, I'll put on some music and I'll say, it's the same thing as the eye contact thing. Put your arms at your sides. And I'm going to have this person get in front of you guys and start to just move around and dance and do certain things. But unless you feel that they are really feeling silly, not stupid, silly, fun, loose, do not respond. And I've literally had people break down and cry during this game because they realize in that moment that they do not have the ability to be silly. And that's a bitch. That sucks.
Interesting. So let's go back to, okay, you've got this room full of 1,000 people, let's say.
Yeah.
And you've got them to feel part of something. What does that feel like to the individual? What is the end game for the individual at the end of the and the end game for you as the person on stage?
Yeah.
Go into what that means.
So, look, I mean, I consider myself very lucky. I know a lot about this, and a lot of it I've learned and taught myself, but there's also a certain just innate ability in what I do. I understand timing. I understand human nature. I understand how to push that, what I call that big red button sitting on everyone's chest, that adrenaline button. And there's a moment, right? It's almost like playing a video game where the energy's going up, going up, going up. And at the moment that's right, you hit that button and the adrenaline shoots through the room. And so to me, it's creating moments for people. It's being exciting. It's being engaging. It's being fun. It's being playful. It's being believable.
It sounds like this contagious business and the adrenaline and you're playing with people's chemistry in many cases.
1,000%. But that's why, listen, that's why I call it the persuasive lion and not the manipulative lion. Because I do understand certain things about the brain and human physiology. And that's really, when you boil it down, that's what this comes down to. At an event, this is about understanding the human mammal. It's about understanding physiology and psychology. The difference is, and there's a very fine line, trust me, there's a very fine line between the art of persuasion and the art of manipulation. And as it's defined, persuasion, let me start with manipulation, is me saying or doing things to change your behavior for my own selfish interests. And only my selfish interests. Persuasion is almost the exact same thing. I'm doing and saying things to change your behavioral response in either your best interests and only your best interests or our mutual best interests. And that's what this is. I don't care where you are or who you're speaking to or what you're doing at an event when there's a room full of 1,000 people and I want to move them in a direction. It's all about psychology. It's all about physiology. It's not just getting up on stage and being a cool guy. It's understanding the nature of these tactics that get people to respond.
So are all events about some sort of persuasion?
1,000%.
And
1,000%.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, of course,
you need a purpose for an event, but I guess if you have a purpose, you need to make sure they're moving towards that purpose.
Of course. I always use like the target as the example. It's about accuracy and precision. You're moving people towards the middle of the target. You want a certain outcome. So if I'm at a social event, what's the objective? To get people on the dance floor, to get them excited, to get them feeling happy, to get them singing and dancing and screaming and yelling and in support of whatever they're there for, right? So that's persuasion in that arena. If I'm at a conference or a speaking engagement, I'm trying to convince you of a certain methodology. I'm trying to change your way of thinking as it relates to my concept. I'm trying to teach you how to communicate better. So I have to say the things that I say and practice what I preach, right? I have to talk the talk and walk the walk, right? Or walk the talk, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's all about persuasion, always. What am I standing up on stage for otherwise? If I'm trying to convince you of something and I'm not convincing, to what end is that?
So what about these event organizers that just want to, they get a keynote because it's going to be entertaining? I mean, are those days gone, or is it still part of the world?
Definitely not. Listen, I'm not an event producer, and I never have been. So I can't really judge the focal point, the intention. But yeah, of course, they want to hire, I would imagine, people that are not only informative and educational, but entertaining and fun and exciting, so that when people look at that event planner, that event producer, they go, wow, he or she brought in the greatest people. Where did you find these people?
So the purpose and the persuasion is to get it so that it's a dynamic thing to build your intellectual capital or something like that.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've been talking for a little while now. Why don't you give us, what do you think? Where are we going from here? What is the world going to look like in the next 5 years?
Oh man, listen,
that's sort of the tough question.
If I have anything to say about it, I'm looking at people like getting away from technology. Look, I realize that I'm one guy. I can't change the world. However, if I had my way, I would put the teaching that I am giving out to everybody in the world, because we'd be in a much different place if people knew how to communicate better. I'm talking internationally. I'm talking if kids were taught this type of technology, this type of communication skills from the time they were in middle school, think about what a different world we'd be in 10 years from now. Yeah, I mean, where's it headed? Geez. Unfortunately, I don't think it's headed in that direction. I have my circle of influence, the people that I can speak to, and hopefully this grows into a huge opportunity for me to speak to several thousand people. But in terms of changing the way humans communicate, I think it's on a downward slope.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, to the extent where at this point there's a social, at some of these social events, some of these parties that we do, they have a thing called silent disco, where, talk about disconnecting to the rest of your surroundings. They give everyone in the room a pair of wireless headphones, and it's silent disco. Literally, you can pick one of however many different tracks that you want to listen to, and people are out there dancing. But if you walked into the room, there's no music on. And people are literally isolated in their own little world. To me, that's crazy town. It's cool. It's different. It's unique, but I wouldn't want it.
Interesting.
I want to have the social experience of listening to the same thing you're listening to and vibing off of that energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
interesting. I didn't realize that the silent disco has such a controversy around it. I guess it makes sense.
It may not. Maybe it's just my controversy, but okay. I just think when I heard about it, I was like, why would you want that? But again, it's what we talked about, however many minutes ago. It's everyone wants something different, something unique.
Yeah.
The minute people become comfortable with one thing, they want something different.
Right.
And because of our fast-paced society, that's happening faster and faster and faster today.
So as we end, how do we get in touch with you? How do we find the Persuasive Lion?
So, my website is www.thepersuasivelion.com. You're more than welcome to contact me on my cell phone, which is 847-903-3879. And I'm available for keynotes, workshops, breakout sessions, seminars, private coaching. Private coaching is amazing. because the one-on-one experience is really elevated and escalated. And I've had people come out of this training program with me, completely different people. And while I don't like to coin myself as a motivational speaker or life coach, I'm a communications expert, but it ultimately boils down to that whole concept of talking to yourself and ends up being a practice in self-improvement.
Right.
Not just how you communicate.
Thank you so much. This has been enlightening and wonderful, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
David, thanks for bringing us that conversation. How interesting was that? Everyone who gets up in front of a crowd, whether you're a keynote speaker, a panel moderator, someone introducing a webinar, or any other manner of public speaking, can really benefit from this public speaking tune-up.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening to me to realize that that there are these techniques that you can use to really simplify your messages and also become more effective without a lot of heavy-duty learning. You just listen through these tips, and it really has an impact.
Event planners ask a lot of speakers and have high expectations, as do audiences. And I thought he had some thought-provoking points. He says you should want somebody on the mic who understands humanity. And to me, that's reading a room and then taking it even a step further.
It is all about that. I mean, because you're really, this is not like a play that you can do over and over again. You have one shot. So you have to make sure you have the right people that are mobilizing the people in the room and the energy in the room, which is what he's talking about as well, I believe.
And we all should remember his point about positive thinking. Give yourself a little pep talk. I'm going to keep that in mind in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just learned so much from him, and I hope that our audience agrees with that. So, Beth, what is going on at BizBash?
Well, everyone should be checking out the San Francisco Top 100, which is out now. This is our annual list of the meetings, events, trade shows, and other important events in the community that really stand out in the Bay Area. What I love about this list is how it truly reflects the community there. Our readers can find out which benefit took donations this year in cryptocurrency, how San Francisco is at, and which festival lets you check your clothes, not just your coat, but your clothes at the door. So it's a lot of fun and has a really interesting collection of events. So find that at bizbash.com.
Yep, it sounds like we follow San Francisco. We're going to follow the future.
It's true.
So before we end, I want to make sure we're thanking all of the people that helped make this podcast together. Dave Nelson, our producer, Claire Hoffman, who is our editorial person on the podcast, and Rebecca Pappas, who distributes it through all the various channels so we can have the widest distribution ever. So here we go, Beth. What do we say now?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on. If you are looking for a state-of-the-art learning management system, take a look at Digitel's newest platform, OpusDX. OpusDX offers the robust platform for event organizers and associations to manage content. To learn more and schedule a demo, email them at contactus@digitelinc.com. That's contact us at digitellinc.com.